One skill that's briefly touched upon in foundational courses is underwater navigation, and that's because it's surprisingly easy to get turned around and lost whilst underwater, but there are a few things that you can learn to do yourself to help keep yourself oriented whilst underwater. Hi all of you awesome scuba divers out there, welcome to the Scuba Diver Magazine channel, your favourite place for the latest scuba diving news and gear reviews. Yes, the first thing that surprises many divers is just how the limited visibility and the shift in movement speed can affect your sense of direction and kind of where you are. Right now, you're quite used to the surface, where you can usually see a fair distance and you're accustomed to how fast you naturally move around, so your brain is kind of calibrated to that surface world. Underwater, however, you're usually much slower, and your visibility is much more limited, and it's very important to make sure that you actually end up in the right place at the right time underwater. If you've ever dreamed of diving some of the most incredible dive sites in the Maldives in comfort and style, Pearl Fleet's luxury liveaboards are designed with scuba divers in mind. From very spacious dive decks and camera stations to elegant cabins and top-tier dining, they combine adventure and relaxation perfectly. So whether you're exploring vibrant reefs, drifting past mantas, or just enjoying a surface interval on the sun deck, the Pearl Fleet makes every moment unforgettable. What I really like about the Pearl Fleet is that they get divers. So the entire layout of the vessels, the flow of everything, the service itself, everything is set up so that you can focus on what you came for, actually scuba diving. You can find out more about their itineraries, their upcoming trips, their fleet options at pearlfleet.com. Check them out and start planning your next liveaboard adventure. And who knows, your next bucket list dive might just be aboard a Pearl Fleet vessel. Good navigation starts before you jump in. Build a map of the dive site using any charts, like satellite imagery that you can find online, and any sort of existing sketch maps that you can find. And one of the first things that I usually put down when I'm drawing my own maps is a north arrow, which points which way is north so that I can orient it, especially when I'm in the water. If I have a compass, then I can kind of say, oh, okay, it's oriented in that direction. Look for the orientation of like reef spurs, which direction they go, any ridges, sand channels, and of course man-made structures such as jetties, moorings and shipwrecks. Which direction are they facing in relation to a compass? A few minutes of analysis usually reveals the layout of the terrain, and those features become reference lines underwater. Study tide and current predictions carefully. Think about how water movement can be affected by the terrain at certain times of day, and which way that water is going to be flowing can help you plan which way to go. And then when you're actually in the water and you feel the current underwater, it can confirm that yes, you're in the right place, or maybe you've gone too far depending on the dive plan. And when you are planning a dive, translate each objectives into legs. So certain legs, one to get you out there, one to bimble around, and then one to do this and one to do that. If the plan is sort of shot line to reef edge, and then to a swim through, and then back to an anchor, assign each leg a bearing, an estimated distance or time, and a planned depth band as well. In low visibility, try and shorten those legs as much as possible, so it's lots of little legs as opposed to one big, so that your chances of like overshooting or just swimming past something are lessened. And then write down that plan concisely in your wet notes, along with hard abort criteria and sort of lost buddy procedures, so that you can have it all written down in front of you at the start of the dive. Head out on this bearing for this amount of time, or however many fin kicks, and then once you reach this point, turn to this heading. It's tempting to rely on memory for a simple site, but The discipline of writing the legs kind of forces you to make explicit choices about headings and distances and turn points, and this like mental model sets the stage for constructive cross checks when reality kind of disagrees with expectations. If you've already been through the dive map and worked out the dive plan, each of the bearings and each of the distances before you've even jumped in the water, you've kind of already done it. You've had a literal dry run. So then when you're actually in the water, it's kind of like you've done this before, and yeah, it is much more natural. Whenever we talk about natural navigation, it is more than just, oh, keep the reef on the right shoulder when you're heading out and left shoulder on the way back. Look for cues when you're in the water. Things like sand ripples on the bottom. They commonly form crests that are roughly perpendicular to the prevailing wave approach. By noting their orientation at the start of a leg and confirming it midway, you kind of gain a current reference, so you know which way it's going. That's independent of your compass. I do the same with the direction of the sun at the start of the dive. Granted, the sun does move slightly during the dive, but if the sun is kind of over there when I start the dive, I know that wherever I am during the dive, if I turn and it's roughly there again, then I'm heading in the same direction to when I started, so I know roughly which direction to head back. A compass is a lot more accurate, but it's easy sometimes just to glance just to see where the sun is and get a rough idea of which direction you're facing. Light and particulate flow are often overlooked, even on overcast days. The sun still creates a subtle brightness gradient that can hint at the kind of cardinal orientation, especially over sand, and suspended particles reveal flow directions, especially when they're caught in the torch beam, so you can see water movement in front of you even before you reach it. And another useful one is don't ignore sound. Boat engines, surf break and harbour noise provide crude but helpful bearings. The exact direction, of course, is hard to decipher when you're underwater, but if the harbour rumble gets louder, you're swimming towards it. If it gets quieter, you're swimming away from it. Distance estimation is an essential section of navigation. You can swim in the perfect heading, but if you don't know how far you're going, then you have no idea like when to stop to look out for whatever it is you're looking for, or maybe you've sort of overshot it. So it's best when you calibrate it in known conditions, so you know basically how quickly it takes you to swim a certain distance. So choose a measured distance in still water. If there's current, it throws all your calculations out. Try and mark a start and a finish for a given distance, and then swim it several times, and you're just normal trim. You're not rushing it, you're not slowballing it, you're just casually like bimbling around, and you want to take that distance timing. It's best not to do it in a swimming pool from one end to the other, because you're starting from dead still, and I'll bet you anything you'll slow down before you hit that end wall. You want to be at normal speed when you start and normal speed when you finish for the most accurate data. You can do it if the swimming pool is big enough. Just choose a measured section in the center so that you can get up to speed and slow down without hitting the end wall. Swim that given distance. Record the number of kick cycles. So I usually do one leg is up, one leg is down, and then you do a complete cycle, and that's one. And an average depth is quite useful to record to account for buoyancy and drag and things, because if your dry suit is inflated more or your BCD is inflated more, it can affect it ever so slightly. But yeah, suppose over, say, a 30-meter distance, you log 36 kick cycles in 2 minutes. That's how long it takes you to swim that distance. If you're now looking at a map and the reef head lies about 70 meters due east of you, the still water estimate is roughly 80 something, 84 cycles for just over like 4.5 minutes, basically. That's how long it should take you if you're heading on that bearing and it's still water, there's no water movement. The numbers they're plain and unglamorous, but they anchor your sense of scale. You know, after that time, you're getting close and you should be able to see it about now. And when you combine that with your natural navigation of the wreck is at a certain depth, and it's on a sandy substrate, and if you look down and it's a sandy substrate and it's at a certain depth, you know you're going to be roughly in the right place. You can build those layers of accuracy, but knowing how long it takes you to swim a certain distance and having that rough calculation in your mind definitely helps. The next step is to apply corrections. If you anticipate a mild current in certain conditions, that can either increase because the water's pushing you forward, so you're naturally swimming a bit faster, or decrease because you're heading straight into the current, then the time it can take you to swim that distance is going to be affected. And a current can gradually push you off course, even when you're heading on the correct heading. If the water movement is coming from one side, it's going to just slowly push you off course. So re-baseline after like significant gear changes. If you've got a new pair of fins, a new BCD with a different profile or anything, or any like bulky gear that you're now diving with, that can all affect the drag and your cadence more than you realize. So just do it again just to see how it affects it, but do it once and kind of try to commit that to memory. Okay, to swim this distance, whatever it is, you can do it in feet or meters, whatever. The bigger the distance, the better or more accurate it is. But yeah, try and commit that to memory, and then in the future you can know if you have to swim a given distance, you know it's going to take you roughly this amount of time or this many fin kicks. Delegate tasks. Don't leave it all up to one person as the navigator. Teams navigate better than individuals when the roles are explicit as well. So assign a navigator who owns their headings and using their compass and their wet notes, and then you have a timekeeper who runs the leg timers and the depth. Swimming next to one another, one diver defines which direction you're going, whilst the other one stops them at a certain time when that time has elapsed. At the point where you should be in the right area, that way you're both working together, you can both focus on one thing as opposed to having to focus on at least two things. If one of you has been following that bearing and the other one has followed the timings, once you reach the area where you should be, now you can check your depths and your bearings, and you should be able to work out either like which side it should be, because you had a bit of cross current, so it should be kind of on our right hand side. If you leave everything up to just a single person, they can of course fixate on their compass whilst the depth gradually drops and they lose control of the number of fin kicks, and it's just best to have each leg of the dive just worked out beforehand, as I mentioned earlier, or like how long it's going to take in what direction, and of course how much gas it's going to take as well if you can. And yeah, try and delegate it so that one person can just focus on one thing, the other on the timings or bearing, whatever it is, and you're working as a team. Compasses are an essential tool, but there are some considerations. The first is that your compass actually works. Analog compasses only work over a certain area of the globe. So if you use a southern hemisphere compass up north, it won't be as accurate, and vice versa. So when you're buying compasses, a lot of the times it'll just be, if you're buying it from a dive center in the northern hemisphere, chances are it's just going to be a northern hemisphere compass, but sometimes you do get the choice. So double check what you actually have and where it works. It should have like NH on it, or SH sometimes, and I've seen in some manuals it actually has a little map of the globe of where the compass is most accurate. But yeah, a single compass isn't calibrated for the entire world. And granted, it's a good, I don't know, 3/4 of the globe that it'll work at, and unless you're diving right down at the South Pole, it's not going to have a huge effect, but it can have an effect. So if you're following written bearings, yeah, your compass might pull you slightly off if it's not calibrated correctly. And digital compasses on dive computers nowadays, they of course need to be calibrated and have their declination set up properly. So double check all of those settings first and recalibrate your compass before the dive. And you can have the most accurate compass in the world. It's useless if you don't use it properly. If you mount your compass right next to your dive computer with an electric battery in it, or like near to a stainless steel dive knife or something, that can skew your compass. And of course, don't even get me started on like magnetic octo holders. Having a really powerful magnet right next to a compass is going to affect its accuracy. So think about your gear, how that may affect your compass for accuracy, and of course you have to hold it horizontally for it to work best. Too many divers, again, they're so focused on their compass they don't actually notice that it's nowhere near horizontal, so the card inside of it, the bit of the compass that actually spins, is stuck on one side. And even though they're following the correct heading, if they actually tilt their compass a bit, and actually shows now what heading they're actually following. So use it properly, make sure it's horizontal. That's why it's good to delegate as much as possible, so that you can focus on these things while someone else is counting fin kicks. But yeah, make sure it's calibrated properly, and make sure that the gear around it isn't affecting its accuracy. Before we wrap up, remember that good navigation starts long before you hit the water. So build that mental map beforehand, use your compass properly, layer in natural navigation by looking around you and taking in those cues, and try to work as a team as much as possible so that you always know where you are and where you're heading in the water. It's one of those skills that quietly makes every single dive much more safer and more enjoyable. A huge thank you to Pearl Fleet for sponsoring this video and supporting the channel. If you're planning your next big dive adventure and you want to put these navigation skills to use on some incredible dive sites, check out Pearl Fleet's liveaboards. I'll leave links in the description and up here in the corner so that you can learn more about their trips and itineraries. If you found this video useful, hit that like button, subscribe to the Scuba Diver Magazine channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future skills videos and gear reviews. Drop a comment below with your favorite navigation tip or a time it saved your dive. I'd love to hear some of your diving stories. Thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.